Marcus Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse office, watching the city that had once bowed to his every business decision. At 35, he was the youngest CEO to ever build a tech empire worth $9 billion, but today that empire was crumbling faster than he could comprehend. "Sir, the board is demanding answers," his assistant Jennifer said, her voice trembling as she entered with another stack of resignation letters. 3 more VPs quit this morning, and the stock has dropped another 15%. Marcus didn't turn around. He couldn't bear to see the fear in her eyes. The same fear he saw reflected in every employee, every investor, every person who had once looked at him like he was invincible. Sterling Tech had been his life's work. What started as a small app development company in his college dorm had grown into a multinational corporation specializing in agricultural technology. Their revolutionary farming software and AI-driven crop management systems had promised to revolutionize agriculture worldwide. But 6 months ago, everything went wrong. The crisis began with reports of massive crop failures across the Midwest. Farmers using Sterling Tech's latest AI system, AgroGenius 3.0, watched helplessly as their fields withered, despite following the software's precise recommendations. What should have been record-breaking harvests became devastating losses. "The lawsuits are piling up," Jennifer continued, setting the papers on his mahogany desk. 1,700 farmers are seeking damages. The preliminary estimates are catastrophic. Marcus finally turned, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the weight of impending doom. "How much?" $8.7 billion. "If we lose even half of these cases, we're finished." Marcus completed the sentence, sinking into his leather chair. The irony wasn't lost on him. A tech genius who'd made his fortune promising to help farmers was being destroyed by the very people he'd tried to serve. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had assembled the most expensive consulting team in corporate history. McKinsey & Company's top analysts, MIT's leading agricultural scientists, Silicon Valley's most brilliant software engineers, over 1,000 of the world's brightest minds had studied the AgroGenius failure. They'd run countless simulations, analyzed terabytes of data, and conducted extensive field research. Their conclusion? The system was perfect, on paper. "Dr. Richardson's team finished their analysis," Jennifer said, referring to the latest group of Harvard experts. "They confirmed what all the others found. The algorithm is mathematically sound, the data processing is flawless, and the recommendations should work." "Should work," Marcus repeated bitterly. "Tell that to the farmers who lost their life savings following our flawless recommendations." The boardroom meetings had become increasingly hostile. Shareholders who once praised his visionary leadership now questioned every decision. The media, which had once hailed him as the agricultural revolution's young prophet, now ran daily exposés about the tech bro who destroyed American farming. Marcus pulled up the latest news headline on his computer. "Sterling Tech CEO faces congressional hearing as agricultural disaster spreads." Below it, a photo showed him leaving the federal building after 8 grueling hours of testimony, looking haggard and defeated. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother David. "Saw the news, you okay?" Marcus stared at the message but couldn't find words to respond. "How do you explain that everything you've worked for is disappearing? That despite having access to the world's greatest minds, you can't solve the puzzle that's destroying your life?" The worst part was the farmers themselves. Marcus had read every letter, every email from families whose generations-old farms were now facing foreclosure because they'd trusted his technology. There was Bill Henderson from Iowa, whose corn yield dropped by 60%. Maria Santos from Nebraska, who lost her entire soybean crop. Tom McKenzie from Kansas, whose wheat fields produced nothing but stubble. "Sir?" Jennifer's voice snapped him back to reality. "The emergency board meeting is in 20 minutes. Marcus nodded, straightening his tie with hands that had developed a slight tremor over the past month. He knew what was coming. The board had lost confidence, the investors were fleeing, and the legal fees were mounting. They'd want his resignation, probably along with a scapegoat narrative that would distance the company from his decisions. As he walked toward the boardroom, Marcus passed the wall of awards and recognition that had once filled him with pride. Tech Entrepreneur of the Year, Innovation in Agricultural Technology, Forbes 30 Under 30. They all seemed like relics from someone else's life. The boardroom was already full when he arrived. 12 stone-faced individuals who had once competed for the privilege of being associated with his success now sat like judges, preparing to deliver a verdict. "Marcus," Chairman Robert Hayes spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "We've made a decision." Marcus took his seat at the head of the table, the same spot where he'd announced his company's IPO, celebrated billion-dollar acquisitions, and outlined plans for global expansion. Today it felt like sitting in the defendant's chair. "The board appreciates your years of service and recognizes your contributions to Sterling Tech's growth," Hayes continued, reading from prepared remarks. "However, given the current crisis and our inability to resolve the Agrogenius failures, we believe new leadership is necessary." The words washed over Marcus like cold water. After everything, the sleepless nights, the sacrificed relationships, the blood, sweat, and tears poured into building this empire, it would end with a corporate euphemism for failure. "We're offering a generous severance package," board member Patricia Wells added, sliding a folder across the table. "Full benefits continuation, stock options protection, and a non-disclosure agreement that protects both parties." Marcus looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. "How long do I have?" "We'd like your resignation effective immediately," Hayes replied. "Jennifer can pack your personal items. Security will escort you out within the hour." The meeting ended with handshakes that felt like funeral arrangements. As Marcus cleaned out his office, removing personal photos and awards that suddenly seemed meaningless, he couldn't stop thinking about the farmers. Even if he was leaving Sterling Tech, their problems remained unsolved. Standing in the elevator for the last time as CEO, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of disappearing into wealthy exile, he would find the answer himself. Somewhere out there was the solution that had eluded 1,000 experts. He just had to find it. The elevator doors opened to the lobby where security waited to escort him out. As Marcus walked through the same entrance where he'd once been celebrated in magazine photo shoots, he pulled out his phone and typed a single message to his assistant. "Cancel my flights to the Hamptons. I'm going to Iowa." The rental car's GPS had stopped working 20 miles ago, leaving Marcus Sterling to navigate Iowa's country roads with nothing but handwritten directions from a gas station attendant. After 3 wrong turns and a brief encounter with a very territorial rooster, he finally spotted the weathered wooden sign, "Henderson Family Farm, Esther 1892. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he'd been making decisions that affected global markets from a climate-controlled boardroom 40 floors above Manhattan. Now he was driving down a dirt road, hoping to find answers from the very people his technology had failed. Bill Henderson emerged from the farmhouse as Marcus parked his BMW between a rusted pickup truck and a John Deere tractor that looked older than both of them combined. The farmer was exactly as Marcus had imagined from their phone conversations: weathered hands, suspicious eyes, and the kind of practical wisdom that comes from working the same land for decades. "You're the CEO," Bill said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Didn't expect you to actually show up." "Former CEO," Marcus corrected, extending his hand, "and I gave you my word." Bill's handshake was firm, calloused, and spoke of a lifetime of honest work. "Come on, then. Let me show you what your fancy computer did to my corn." They walked through fields that should have been golden with mature corn. Instead, Marcus saw rows of stunted, yellowed stalks that barely reached his waist. The contrast with neighboring farms was stark. Where other fields showed healthy growth, Henderson's land looked diseased. "Agrogenius told me to plant 3 weeks earlier than usual," Bill explained, kicking at the dry soil. "Said the AI predicted optimal conditions based on soil composition, weather patterns, and satellite imagery. Recommended specific fertilizer combinations, irrigation schedules, even the exact spacing between seeds." Marcus pulled out his tablet, accessing the Agrogenius data for Henderson's farm. The numbers were perfect. Soil pH balanced, nutrients optimized, weather predictions accurate to within 2 degrees. "The system shows everything within normal parameters." "Normal for who?" Bill asked. "My grandfather farmed this land. My father farmed this land. I've been working these fields for 37 years. Your computer might know science, but it doesn't know this dirt." As they walked, Marcus began to notice things his experts had missed. The way water pooled in certain areas, despite the system's drainage recommendations. How the soil texture varied dramatically across fields that the AI had treated as uniform. The subtle differences in how crops responded to identical treatments based on factors that didn't show up in satellite data. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus began, but the farmer cut him off. "Call me Bill. And before you start apologizing again, there's someone you should meet." Bill pointed toward the eastern edge of his property. "My neighbor might have answers you're looking for." They climbed into Bill's pickup truck, driving down a path that Marcus's BMW definitely couldn't handle. After 10 minutes of bouncing over ruts and dodging potholes, they reached a modest farmhouse surrounded by the most vibrant fields Marcus had seen since arriving in Iowa. "That's the Sullivan place," Bill said. "Emma's land borders mine on 3 sides. She's the only farmer in the county who didn't use your system." A young woman emerged from the barn, wiping grease from her hands with a dirty rag. Emma Sullivan was nothing like the farmer's daughters Marcus had imagined from movies. No pigtails or overalls. Instead, she wore practical jeans, work boots, and a faded Iowa State t-shirt. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her green eyes held an intelligence that immediately caught his attention. "Emma, this is Marcus Sterling," Bill called out. "The tech fellow I told you about." Emma approached with confident strides, her gaze evaluating Marcus like she would a piece of equipment she was considering buying. "You're smaller than I expected from the magazine photos." "I get that a lot," Marcus replied, unsure whether to be amused or offended. "Bill says you want to understand why your system failed." Emma's directness was refreshing after months of corporate doublespeak. "You really think you can figure it out by walking around a few farms?" "I have to try. 1,000 experts couldn't solve it from laboratories and conference rooms. Maybe the answer is out here." Emma studied his expression, looking for signs of the arrogance she'd expected from a tech billionaire. Instead, she saw something unexpected, genuine humility and determination. "All right," she said finally, "but if you want to understand farming, you're going to have to get those soft hands dirty." For the next week, Marcus lived in a world completely foreign to his previous experience. Emma put him to work, real work. He learned to check soil moisture by feel, to read weather patterns by watching cloud formations, and to spot pest problems that satellites couldn't detect. "Your system treats every field like a spreadsheet," Emma explained as they walked through her cornrows. "But farming isn't mathematics, it's intuition, built on generations of observation." She showed him things that no algorithm could quantify, how the subtle slope of a field affected drainage in ways that topographical maps missed, why certain soil combinations worked better together despite having identical chemical compositions, how local weather patterns created microclimates that defied regional forecasting. "My great-grandfather planted these fields," Emma said, running her hands through healthy corn stalks. "He taught my grandfather, who taught my father, who taught me." Each generation learned something new, but they also passed down knowledge you can't get from books or computers. Marcus began documenting everything, filling notebooks with observations that would have seemed primitive to his former colleagues. But slowly, patterns emerged that no expert had considered. "The timing recommendations," Marcus said one evening as they sat on Emma's porch after another long day in the fields. "Agrogenius calculated optimal planting dates based on temperature and rainfall data, but it didn't account for something, did it?" Emma smiled, the first time he'd seen her truly pleased with one of his insights. "What do you think it missed?" Marcus thought back to his conversations with farmers across 3 states. "Local variations. Your system, the traditional farming methods, they're not based on regional data. They're based on this specific land, this exact microclimate, this particular soil composition that's developed over more than a century." "Bingo." Emma leaned back in her chair. "Your AI treated Iowa farming like it's the same as Nebraska farming, or Illinois, or anywhere else with similar climate zones. But every farm is unique. Every field has its own personality." As the days passed, Marcus found himself drawn not just to Emma's knowledge, but to Emma herself. Her passion for the land was infectious, her practical intelligence humbling, and her dry sense of humor a welcome contrast to the corporate world he'd left behind. "You're different than I expected," Emma said one evening as they watched the sunset over fields that she'd helped him understand. "Different how?" "Less arrogant, more human." She paused. "I thought tech billionaires were supposed to be insufferable." "Former tech billionaire," Marcus corrected with a smile, "and I'm finding that losing everything has a way of making you more human." But even as Marcus began to understand the farming wisdom that had eluded his experts, the legal and financial pressures from his former life continued mounting. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from lawyers, reporters, and former board members. The severance package from Sterling Tech wouldn't last forever, and the farmers' lawsuits were still proceeding. "You can't hide out here forever," Emma said, noticing his stress during a particularly difficult phone call with his attorney. "I'm not hiding. I'm learning." "Learning what?" "How to milk cows and drive tractors. That won't solve your legal problems or help the farmers who lost everything." Marcus looked at her, realizing she was right. Understanding the problem was only the first step. He needed to find a solution that could actually help the thousands of farmers affected by AgroGenius's failures. "What if," Marcus said slowly, an idea forming, "what if we could combine traditional farming wisdom with modern technology? Not replace the human element, but enhance it?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Your knowledge, your intuition about this land, what if we could teach that to a computer? Not override farmer expertise, but amplify it?" For the first time since he'd arrived, Emma looked genuinely intrigued. "Keep talking." Marcus Sterling's transformation from billionaire CEO to farmhand hadn't gone unnoticed by the media. Photos of him covered in Iowa soil, learning to operate farm equipment, had sparked everything from mockery to grudging respect. But Marcus was too focused on his work with Emma to care about public perception. They'd been collaborating for 3 weeks, combining Emma's generational farming knowledge with Marcus's technical expertise. What started as casual conversations had evolved into detailed documentation of farming practices that had never been systematically recorded. "Tell me again about your grandfather's weather prediction method," Marcus said, typing notes into his laptop as they sat in Emma's kitchen after another long day in the fields. Emma poured coffee from a pot that had seen better decades. Grandpa Joe could predict rain 3 days out just by watching the cattle and checking the wind direction at dawn. He'd say, "Emma, watch how the cows cluster together and face east when a storm's coming." "And this worked?" "Better than any weather app I've tried." Emma sat across from him, her eyes bright with memories. "Dad taught me to read the soil by how it felt between my fingers. Too dry, and you can feel the dust particles separately. Too wet, and it clumps wrong. But perfect moisture. The soil feels almost alive." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "What if we could teach a computer to recognize these patterns? Not to replace farmer intuition, but to learn from it." "You tried that already with AgroGenius." "No, we didn't. AgroGenius was built by academics and programmers who'd never set foot on a working farm. What if we created a system that actually learned from farmers like you?" Emma considered this. "You mean like an AI that could understand why my corn grows better than Bill's, even though we use the same seed varieties?" "Exactly." Marcus's excitement was building. "Traditional AI tries to find universal patterns, but farming isn't universal, it's intensely local. What if we created a system that learned the specific patterns of individual farms?" Their breakthrough came during a conversation about Emma's irrigation decisions. She'd been explaining how she adjusted watering schedules based on factors that seemed almost mystical to Marcus. "I check the soil moisture every morning, but not just with instruments," Emma said, leading him to her vegetable garden. "I look at how the plants are standing, how the leaves reflect light, even how the earthworms behave." Marcus knelt down, trying to see what she saw. "The plants look the same to me." Emma pointed to subtle differences he'd missed, slight variations in leaf color, almost imperceptible changes in how stems held themselves upright, the density of spider webs on different plants. "Your eyes aren't trained yet," she said kindly. "But what if we could train a computer to see these things?" The idea hit Marcus like lightning. Computer vision. "We could use advanced imaging to detect the visual patterns you're seeing, then correlate them with soil conditions, weather data, and crop outcomes." "English, please." Marcus started pacing excitedly. "Cameras that could see what experienced farmers see. Software that could learn from thousands of farms, not to replace farmer knowledge, but to help inexperienced farmers learn from experts like you." Emma's skepticism was evident. "And this would be different from your last system, how?" "Because this time we start with farmers, not algorithms. We learn from people like you who've made farming work for generations, then use technology to share that knowledge." That evening, Marcus made a decision that would risk everything he had left. He called his former assistant, Jennifer, who'd been fielding inquiries from venture capitalists interested in his next move. "I need you to set up meetings," he told her. "Not with tech investors, with agricultural cooperatives, farming organizations, and anyone who actually works with farmers. Sir, the offers I'm getting are from Silicon Valley firms wanting to fund your next startup. We're talking hundreds of millions in potential funding. I'm not interested in more Silicon Valley money. I need to talk to people who understand agriculture." Marcus's plan was ambitious and risky. Instead of seeking traditional tech investment, he would develop his new system in partnership with farming communities. The software would be built by farmers, for farmers, with technology serving farming wisdom rather than replacing it. His first presentation was to the Iowa Agricultural Cooperative, a group of farmers who had every reason to distrust anything associated with the agro-genius disaster. Bill Henderson had arranged the meeting, but Marcus could feel the skepticism in the room as he stood before 50 farmers who'd been burned by his technology. "I know you have no reason to trust me," Marcus began, abandoning his prepared PowerPoint for a more direct approach. "6 months ago, I thought I could solve farming with algorithms and data. I was wrong." He told them about his time with Emma, the lessons he'd learned about the inadequacy of one-size-fits-all solutions. But more importantly, he listened to their stories, decades of farming experience that no computer had ever captured. "What I'm proposing isn't a replacement for your knowledge," Marcus explained. "It's a tool to share that knowledge. Imagine if a young farmer in Nebraska could learn from the expertise of farmers in Iowa, Kansas, and Oklahoma, all adapted to their specific land and conditions." The questions were sharp and skeptical. How would this be different from AgroGenius? How could they trust another tech system? What guarantees could he offer that this wouldn't fail like before? "I can't guarantee anything," Marcus admitted, "but I can promise this. Any system we build will be developed with farmers as equal partners. You won't be customers, you'll be co-creators." The meeting ended without commitments, but Marcus sensed a shift in the room's energy. These weren't people opposed to technology. They were people who'd been burned by technology that ignored their expertise. Emma had attended the meeting, sitting quietly in the back. As farmers filed out, she approached Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. "That was either very brave or very stupid," she said. "Probably both. What did you think?" "I think," Emma said slowly, "that you might actually understand what went wrong the first time." Over the following weeks, Marcus and Emma worked 18-hour days developing prototypes. They started small, a simple app that could help farmers document local conditions and share observations with neighbors. Instead of top-down algorithms, they built bottom-up learning systems that captured the practical wisdom farmers used every day. Their first test case was Bill Henderson's farm. Using sensors, cameras, and machine learning tools, they documented everything: soil conditions, plant health indicators, weather patterns, and most importantly, Bill's daily decisions and observations. "The system isn't telling Bill what to do," Marcus explained to Emma as they watched data flow in real time. "It's learning from what Bill does, then looking for patterns that could help other farmers facing similar conditions." The breakthrough came when their system identified a correlation that had escaped every expert analysis. Bill's crop failures weren't just about timing or fertilizer. They were about soil compaction patterns created by specific combinations of weather and farming equipment that varied from field to field. "Look at this," Emma said, pointing to visualization data on Marcus's laptop. "The system is showing that fields with certain soil types performed better when planted using your grandfather's tractor instead of the modern equipment." Marcus stared at the data. The weight distribution. Modern equipment is more efficient, but it creates different compaction patterns. AgroGenius never considered equipment variables specific to individual farms. They'd found the missing piece, the hyperlocal factors that made each farm unique. But more importantly, they discovered a methodology for capturing and sharing traditional farming wisdom in ways that could help farmers across the country. As word of their work spread, something unexpected happened. Farmers began reaching out, not seeking compensation for past failures, but wanting to be part of the solution. The Iowa Agricultural Cooperative agreed to pilot the new system across 50 farms. Agricultural universities offered research partnerships. Even some of Marcus's former critics in the tech world began taking notice. "You realize what you're building, don't you?" Emma asked one evening as they reviewed partnership proposals from farming organizations across the Midwest. "A better agricultural AI system?" "No," Emma smiled. "You're building a bridge between two worlds that have been talking past each other for decades, technology and tradition." Marcus looked at Emma, brilliant, practical, passionate Emma, who taught him that the most sophisticated technology meant nothing without human wisdom to guide it. Somewhere between learning to read soil moisture and understanding the importance of local knowledge, he'd fallen in love with more than just farming. But before he could explore those feelings, they needed to prove their system worked. The real test was coming, a full-scale implementation across multiple states, with thousands of farmers and millions of dollars in crop value at stake. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked, sensing his nervousness about the upcoming expansion. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the corporate boardroom to Iowa soil, from technological arrogance to humble collaboration. He'd lost $1 billion empire, but he'd found something more valuable, a chance to actually solve the problem that had destroyed his first company. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said. "But I'm not doing this alone anymore." Emma's smile told him she understood he meant more than just their professional partnership. 1 year after Marcus Sterling had been escorted from his Manhattan headquarters, he stood in a very different kind of office. The headquarters of Agricultural Wisdom Technologies occupied a converted barn in Iowa, complete with exposed wooden beams, energy-efficient lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking actual farmland. Emma Sullivan, now co-founder and chief agricultural officer, was presenting their quarterly results to a room full of farmers, investors, and agricultural scientists. The contrast with Marcus's old boardroom couldn't have been starker. Instead of suits and corporate buzzwords, this meeting featured work boots, practical discussions, and real-world solutions. "Our partnership network now includes 12,000 farms across 15 states, Emma announced, her confidence in public speaking having grown dramatically over the past year. Average crop yield improvements of 32%, with some farms seeing increases of over 50%. Marcus watched from the side of the room, still amazed by how different success felt this time around. Instead of stock prices and market valuations, their metrics focused on farmer profitability, sustainable practices, and knowledge sharing between farming communities. The transformation hadn't been easy. Building a technology company that truly served farmers required abandoning every Silicon Valley playbook Marcus had ever learned. Instead of seeking rapid scaling and maximum profit margins, they'd grown slowly, carefully, always ensuring that farmers remained partners rather than customers. "The key to our success," Emma continued, "is what we call collaborative intelligence. Our AI doesn't replace farmer expertise, it amplifies and shares it across our network." Their system, now called FarmWise, had evolved far beyond Marcus's initial vision. Farmers could input daily observations using simple smartphone apps, sharing everything from soil conditions to pest sightings. The AI learned from this collective wisdom, identifying patterns and correlations that helped farmers make better decisions while respecting local variations. But the real innovation was in the business model. Instead of selling expensive software licenses, FarmWise operated as a cooperative. Farmers shared data and paid modest membership fees, while the technology remained open source and community-controlled. Profits were reinvested in research, development, and support for farming communities. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Henderson's settlement approved, last of the AgroGenius lawsuits officially resolved. The legal nightmare from his previous company had finally ended. Instead of fighting the lawsuits, Marcus had worked with affected farmers to implement FarmWise solutions that actually addressed their problems. Many farmers who'd initially sued Sterling Tech were now partners in the new venture. After Emma's presentation, Marcus found himself on the front porch of their headquarters, looking out over fields that had taught him everything about the intersection of technology and tradition. The October sunset painted the Iowa sky in shades of gold that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with this landscape and with the woman who'd shown him its secrets. "Penny for your thoughts," Emma said, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. "Just thinking about how different this feels from my old life." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "Last year I measured success in stock prices and market share. Now I get excited about soil health improvements in Nebraska," Emma laughed. So you've definitely changed. Remember when you thought farmers were just inefficient users of technology? God, was I really that arrogant? Completely insufferable, Emma confirmed with a grin. But you learned. That's more than most tech executives ever manage. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone ringing. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in months. Robert Hayes, his former board chairman. Marcus, Hayes's voice carried a tone of barely concealed amazement. I've been following your new venture. Impressive work. Thank you, Robert. To what do I owe the call? I have a proposition. Sterling Tech has struggled since your departure. The board is interested in acquiring agricultural wisdom technologies. We're prepared to offer $2 billion for full ownership of your technology and team. Marcus looked at Emma, who could hear Hayes's voice through the phone. Her expression was carefully neutral, but he could see the question in her eyes. That's a generous offer, Robert, but we're not interested in being acquired. Marcus, be reasonable. $2 billion would make you wealthier than you were before the agrogenius crisis. You could retire, invest in other ventures, live anywhere in the world. I appreciate the offer, but agricultural wisdom technologies isn't for sale. Not to Sterling Tech, not to anyone. Hayes's frustration was palpable. You're making a mistake. The agricultural technology market is heating up. Major corporations are moving into this space with resources you can't match from a converted barn in Iowa. After ending the call, Marcus and Emma sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their evening dance across the fields. Any regrets? Emma asked finally. Marcus considered the question seriously. A year ago, $2 billion would have seemed like vindication, proof that he'd rebuilt his empire stronger than before. But money felt different now. Success felt different. None, he said finally. What we've built here is worth more than any acquisition offer. Even if it means staying in Iowa instead of returning to Manhattan penthouse living. Marcus turned to face Emma fully. Especially because it means staying in Iowa, with you. The conversation they'd been avoiding for months finally came to the surface. Somewhere between learning to farm and building a company together, their professional partnership had deepened into something more personal. But both had been hesitant to complicate their working relationship. Marcus, Emma began, but he gently interrupted. I know this is complicated. We're business partners. We work together every day, and my track record with relationships isn't exactly stellar. But Emma, these past months have been the happiest of my life, not because of the company's success, but because of you. Emma's response was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar pickup truck. Bill Henderson emerged, wearing his best shirt and an expression of barely contained excitement. Sorry to interrupt, Bill called out, but I had to share the news. The Iowa Agricultural Cooperative just approved our proposal for statewide FarmWise implementation. 5,000 farms, full technology support, and a partnership agreement that makes us the official agricultural AI system for Iowa. The magnitude of the announcement hit Marcus immediately. Statewide implementation meant proving that their cooperative model could scale without losing its community focus. It also meant they'd officially surpassed agrogenius's reach at its peak. There's more, Bill continued. The Nebraska and Missouri cooperatives want similar partnerships. We're talking about 15,000 farms across 3 states by next spring. Emma stood up, her excitement evident. That's incredible, Bill. How did the vote go? Unanimous approval. And Marcus, they specifically requested that you present the implementation plan to the State Agricultural Commission next month. As Bill drove away, still celebrating, Marcus realized the symmetry of the moment. Exactly 1 year after losing his first empire, he was building a second one, but this time with values that mattered more than valuations. So, Emma said, returning to their interrupted conversation, you were saying something about relationships and happiness? Marcus took her hand, feeling calloused fingers that spoke of honest work and practical wisdom. I was saying that I love you, Emma Sullivan. I love your intelligence, your passion for farming, your ability to keep me grounded when I start thinking like a tech executive again. Emma's smile was worth more than any billion-dollar empire. I love you too, Marcus Sterling, even if you still can't tell good soil from dirt without looking at your tablet. Their kiss was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with notifications. Word of the Iowa partnership was already spreading through agricultural and technology media. By morning, agricultural wisdom technologies would be national news. But for now, Marcus ignored the phone. He'd learned something important during his transformation, from failed CEO to successful farmer entrepreneur. The best victories are measured not in dollars or headlines, but in the satisfaction of solving real problems for real people. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a very different venue, the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., accepting the Agricultural Innovation Award from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. FarmWise now served over 20,000 farms across 10 states, with international expansion beginning in Canada and Australia. This award isn't just for agricultural wisdom technologies, Marcus said in his acceptance speech. It's recognition that the future of farming lies not in replacing human expertise with artificial intelligence, but in using technology to amplify and share the wisdom that farmers have developed over generations. Emma sat in the front row, wearing the same Iowa State t-shirt she'd worn the day they met, now paired with a blazer that represented her role as co-founder of a company revolutionizing agriculture. On her finger was an engagement ring made from reclaimed gold and a diamond that Marcus had insisted be ethically sourced, values that reflected how much his priorities had changed. The Q&A session after his speech focused on the cooperative business model that had initially seemed so risky to investors. "Mr. Sterling," asked a reporter from Agritech Weekly, "your previous company was valued at $9 billion before its collapse. Agricultural Wisdom Technologies is estimated to be worth significantly more, yet you've maintained farmer ownership of core technologies. Why not pursue maximum valuation?" Marcus smiled, thinking of all the ways he might have answered that question a year earlier. Because maximum valuation and maximum impact aren't the same thing. We've proven that farmers don't need to be customers of agricultural technology. They can be partners and co-owners. After the ceremony, Marcus and Emma walked through Washington's evening streets, discussing their next challenge, international expansion that maintained their cooperative principles while navigating different agricultural systems and regulations. "Nervous about expanding to Australia?" Emma asked as they passed the Washington Monument. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "But it's the good kind of terrified, the kind that means we're doing something that matters." Emma stopped walking and turned to face him. "Marcus Sterling, 2 years ago you were a tech billionaire who thought farmers were inefficient users of technology. Now you're about to revolutionize global agriculture while wearing work boots to award ceremonies. What happened to you?" Marcus looked at the woman who'd taught him that the most sophisticated algorithms meant nothing without human wisdom to guide them. "I met a farm girl who saved my empire and taught me what success actually means." Their story had become legend in both tech and agricultural circles. The billionaire CEO who lost everything, learned to farm, and built something better with the wisdom of someone who'd never left Iowa. But for Marcus and Emma, it was simply the beginning of a life built on the foundation that technology serves humanity best when it honors, rather than replaces, human expertise. As they walked toward their hotel, planning their wedding for the following spring in the same Iowa fields, where Marcus had learned to read soil and Emma had taught him to see agriculture through farmers' eyes, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification from FarmWise. Crop yields up 45% in drought-affected regions thanks to cooperative water management sharing. He showed the notification to Emma, who smiled and put the phone back in his pocket. "Work can wait," she said. "Tonight we celebrate what we've built together." Marcus Sterling had once measured his worth in stock prices and market valuations. Now he measured it in soil health improvements, farmer profitability, and the love of a woman who'd shown him that the most valuable things in life couldn't be calculated by algorithms. They could only be cultivated with patience, wisdom, and genuine care for the people technology was meant to serve. If you enjoyed this incredible story of how a farm girl's wisdom saved a tech empire and led to both $1 billion success and true love, please hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. I'd love to know where you're watching from around the world. Drop a comment below and let me know which country or city you're from. It's always fascinating to see how these stories of transformation and second chances resonate with people everywhere. Did Marcus and Emma's journey from the corporate boardroom to the Iowa farmland inspire you? Which part of their story did you find most compelling? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our latest uploads. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next story.